Hello, everybody. Thank you for having us. We wish we could be with you in sunny Melbourne, but we won't be able to make it. So we were pre-recording this presentation in advance. So today, May and I are going to be talking about Aquatopian Ecologies, which we are thinking of in terms of a multi-species praxis that we've been developing with Harmattan Theatre.
Good morning,
Mm.
everybody. This is May, and I just want to say it's a real privilege to present at this conference, and I want to thank Janet Wilson and Michael Griffiths and all the organizers for inviting us. And the work we present here are four key topics on directions that have shaped our company.
That's right. So our work with Harmattan Theatre is very much centered on these principles of risk volatility, and we are very much developing a transoceanic praxis. So we are working collaboratively with non-human worlds and entities, and that informs how we do our responses to climate change and environmental precarity. The performances that we are going to talk about today are from our book, Aquatopia, that just came out this year with Routledge. And it's a book in which we really give an overview of the work we've been developing with Harmattan Theatre since 2010, when I joined the company. And we are approaching water as a liminal substance and focusing on sites that are especially exposed to rising sea levels and climate change. So we are working with oceans, seas, rivers, lagoons, lakes, and all kinds of bodies of water and precarious sites. So these are the four performances that we are going to be focusing on for our talk today. Mar Português, which was performed in Lisbon in 2012, Aquatopia from Venice, and Far Rockaway and Aquatopia from New York. I meant Aqua Alta from Venice. May, would you like to say a little bit about each one of these performances?
Sure, thank you, Sofia. So the idea to create this company emerged just out of a need on my part to respond through live practice to the rising challenges of climate change and the oceans rising. And these four performances were performances that emerged out of site-specific concerns, where navigational histories of the 1600s intersects with 21st century questions about climate. And this map is a map of the Dutch East India Company's entrepots from the 1600s. The Dutch East India Company, which also colonized what today we call New York, but used to be called New Amsterdam, had a vast array of colonial ports, 600 of them, of which Taipei, Cochin, and New Amsterdam were just a few. And today, some of these ports, most of them in Asia, are some of the largest metropolises in the world that are sinking because they're all low-lying and often situated in archipelagos. And the work we've been doing is marking some of these low-lying regions to remind coastal peoples of the water lines we've forgotten as reclaimed land and overbuilding has submerged 1600 and 1700 waterfronts. The particular instance of the 2004 tsunami, which was catastrophic and 200,000 people passed away across Asia, and uncannily they affected the ports that were originally established by the Dutch in the 1600s. And to me, the startling overlay of 1600 mappings of early colonial ports with the 21st century challenges of catastrophe and climate really brought to the fore the importance that we overlay and think about these implications for future climate considerations.
So this is an image from Mar Português that we performed in Lisbon in 2012. And this the site that we chose for this performance is Cais das Colunas, which is a World Heritage Site that is currently very touristy, but it's an incredibly important historical site. This is where Vasco da Gama's ships first arrived in Lisbon from the first sea voyage to India. So this site encapsulates so much history, and of course it's also a sinking site, and it's also a very polluted site because the Tagus River is by this industrial area in Lisbon with extremely high toxicity levels in the river waters that then go into the Atlantic Ocean. So we chose this site in order to revisit the hauntings from this past, this very violent colonial past that is embedded in the history of this site. So for this performance, we were working with a dancer, Diana Bastos, who performed the sea spirit, so a sort of sprite that comes in as a kind of magical rendition of this water history that we are bringing to this performance. Here we have Diana throughout the show, and we performed for several hours at this site. And I am here performing what we imaginatively conceived of as the daughter of the Gama. So the Gama died in Cochin from a tropical fever, and we found this way of reenacting this part of the history as this daughter who is in Lisbon waiting for a father to return. And so here we are still at Cais das Colunas, but at a slightly different area. So it's much more industrial, and if we keep going, it becomes less and less of a touristy site and much more of an industrial commercial site. Here are more images of Diana performing, and you can't see here all the images of the people around us, all the tourists and just people passing by. So it looks like we are very much on our own, but we are not. Here we have another image of Diana as the sea sprite. And this performance is Aqua Alta, which we did in Venice in 2014. And what you see here is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, medieval bridges in Europe. So these bridges always have this kind of very minimalist design, and they are really pieces of architecture that are quite well preserved because they're part of World Heritage. So we decided to use this one to mark a crossing through the water at Ponte del Diavolo, and this is in the island of Torcello. So here I'm at the front, and then we have the other performers, and this is all performed always in the Harmattan slow walk technique. So what we really wanted to get at from this performance is to collaborate with the multi-species environment of Venice and to engage with Venice as a sinking city. So a city that is really a semi-aquatic liminal environment during flooding season with a phenomenon of Aqua Alta, which used to be seasonal and more or less predictable, but now is much less so. And we really have a very big problem of rising water levels in Venice. So we can think of Venice as sort of vanishing archive or a sinking archive. And we really wanted to find a way to grapple with this situation of emergency and to engage with the site that we chose as a site of physical, affective, and cognitive attunement. So this is really how we do our multi-species praxis of collaboration with the lived environment. And importantly, this site-specific performance is done again, just like Mar Português, in public space. So this bridge is open to anyone. There are passersby, there are people interrupting our performance. And our intention is to perform in real time with the past, with the historicity and multiple genealogies and archives of each site that we perform with, and to stimulate an attunement to these volatile elements around us as we perform. So the rain, wind, tides, heat, cold, all the elements that we are exposed to while we perform. So multi-species activity is very much what is informing our performance practice. We are thinking about water as something that melts, floods, it's sinking, all these different kinds of activity or phenomena, and how to engage with them and how to performatively reenact them. We are concerned, of course, about eco-crisis, but we are also finding ways to produce a kind of liminal intervention. So a way of being with this crisis, not necessarily providing a solution, but rather responding in collaboration with the lived environment. And here we have an image from Far Rockaway, which maybe we'll talk about.
Thank you, Sofia. The images of Portugal's performance and the one in Venice both also invoke the histories of navigation and the maritime. And one of the key threads that weaves through our work is the intersection of the human with the non-human. And it's a challenge. How does one create performances that engage with those questions? And in this case here, this image, which is the image was one of the moments in the performance created at the site in the Rockaways, the Barrier Islands of New York. We were gesturing towards the amphibious and terra-aqueous structures of archipelagic barrier island typologies that New York City and many low-lying coastal barrier island typologies around the world are facing, which are sinking typologies such as Venice, and the coast of Lisbon, which is actually estuarial, where the Tagus meets the Atlantic, as the Hudson River in New York meets the Atlantic as well. And if you'll just give us the next slide, please. So I will speak about just the two performances that were the two that connected New York to its history of citing the Lenape people's efforts to survive under colonialism. And I speak from the land of the Lenape, and I want to acknowledge that I am here in the behest and generosity of the Lenape peoples. And this particular site of this performance is actually both a memorial to the 300 firefighters who lived around here and are buried there, but it's also a marker of this very place on which the Lenape peoples hid from the Dutch for about 100 years after colonization. And it was a site that was entirely washed away by a catastrophic storm called Hurricane Sandy. We performed this a year after the first year of its anniversary. If you would please, the next slide. So this performance of engaging with the sea, with the harbor, with the estuarial structures of the barrier islands was a theme that we wanted to raise in terms of precarity, about the challenges between managed retreat, as well as the kind of very stubborn, very built-in resistance to engaging with climate that exists on these barrier islands, where people have been living year-round for about 100 years on a geological formation that's not geared for year-round habitation. This is Lisbeth During and Russell Patrick Brown on the harp. And here again, our intersection of human with the non-human, and the questions of multispecial coexistence is a process of awakening. The next slide, thank you. Here we have Frances Bradley, we have Kristen Prevelet, we have Elizabeth During, and what we are in this image is facing towards Manhattan and towards the archipelago's extending landmass with the mainland, please. So the Rockaway performance was very critical to addressing the sense of fragility the Hurricane Sandy left us. This particular spot we chose to perform on was cut away from the rest of New York for 8 months because the trains were destroyed. So here again, if you would please, the next slide. We really are working with the dire insecurities and uncertainties of living on the barrier islands that an archipelago poses for us. This particular view is unique because it has 3 cities layered. It has Brooklyn, Manhattan, and New Jersey, and it's unique in terms of a perspective of the Lenape peoples facing basically the United States. Finally, the performance I want to end our talk on is what we call Aquatopia. It was performed in Governor's Island in the year of 2017, when there were 5 major storms that washed the eastern seaboard of the United States and destroyed much of the Caribbean's islands, including Barbuda. And we created this performance in solidarity with other low-lying regions of the world at a site that is a marker of the first point of landing of Dutch colonization. This is Governor's Island. And what you see in the midpoint of this photograph is the site where the Dutch would have arrived on Governor's Island in the foreground. And ahead you see the island of Manhattan, on which the Dutch created an onslaught in 1625. And we created a performance here because this is the new landscape of climate adaptation. And the stones are from Greece. And so we wanted to mark the challenges of climate adaptation. Please go ahead. Perhaps you could speak a word about it, Sofia.
Well, yes, I was part of this performance, and I found the space, the site itself, quite stunning. It's a very difficult space to navigate as a performer, and the entire area is a built environment. So you could think of it as a large scale sculpture, really. And here we have, I believe, quite a few of the performers, and then also the audience that we had that particular day.
The uniqueness of this performance is that all these stones were brought from Greece, and this was the first construction in New York to create the new climate adaptation landscapes that are meant to be flooded, as opposed to building conventional sea walls. And so we created a performance on this raised hillside, again, as a marker of the new changing landscapes that much of the low-lying regions of the world will have to face. This performance had over 100 performers in it. It was 20 people in the company, and the rest were all spontaneous, joining in the final festival parade, dance, march to the top of the hill. This is James Cascato playing Dante, who recites in Italian from the Inferno. And the evocation of the Hudson River through the blue scarves was a drawing to attention of how much we are dependent on the Hudson River and how fragile our existence is in the New York Harbor with the impact of climate change, which during Hurricane Sandy had completely flooded the downtown Manhattan and downtown Brooklyn and much of the coastal New York. Elizabeth During, Nandini Sikand. And this performance riveted a lot of people and brought a lot of people into the climate conversation in ways that otherwise they are not part of. Performance has a powerful agentic, immersive potential to raise questions about the Anthropocene and to actually give people the ability to engage with these hard questions in ways that render us active and peripatetically involved in decision-making that affect us and how we will occupy a place on the planet. To that extent, the precarity of all of these performances you've seen today are just small gestures towards Sofia and my efforts to address questions, particularly the hard one of what can we do in the era of climate adaptation, climate change, but also climate negation, which is a prominent part of how the US decision-making is going. Thank you so much.
And here we have one of our final images documenting this performance. Yes, so the performances we spoke about today really are our way of thinking about what multi-species praxis might be. What can we do with that concept, with that practice? And of course, we are thinking of the multi-species in relation to Guattari's definition of species. So kind of a way of considering different categories, including concepts, media, and objects, and not only thinking about living entities necessarily. And what we try to do in our performances, and here you have an image from the very first performance I did with Harmattan from 2010, Dreamscapes. What we are trying to do is to find ways to inhabit our bodies and our surroundings. So to really shift awareness, to really shift consciousness in terms of how we are in the lived environment and how we participate in that lived environment. So to really understand our contribution to climate change, to rising sea levels, and what might be done otherwise. How can we potentially change things? And how can we not? So also the limits of what we can do, which are very much felt when we are performing as a collective, as a group, and are exposed to the elements, to the weather. We can sense how small we are, and at the same time how much we can really do, and how the weight of our actions. Would you like to say a few more words, May?
Thank you, Sofia. I want to acknowledge that Sofia's brilliance and really minoritarian thinking has really helped me realize why we should continue to engage with this overwhelming sense of helplessness that a lot of us feel in the face of the fact that we are almost going to exceed 2 degrees centigrade, and much of the planet has not, particularly the global north, has not met the requirements for mitigation at all. And there's this massive divide between the global north that will adapt to climate and the global south that will sink because they do not have the resources to adapt. And I think that's the heart of the tensions of what our theater work and our process-driven multi-species praxis, engaging with the human, the non-human, and the multi-species matrices through which movement and breathing and action, engage with precarity. I think this is what both of us are very concerned and immersed in, and it's a process of awakening communities and populations that are complacent about the question of how shall we live in the next 50 years.
Yes, and perhaps also the question of how becoming non-human might actually be quite helpful. So leaving behind our sense of human exceptionalism might be crucial for looking at climate change in a very different way, not as us, the humans, detached from what's happening around us that we can potentially control, but rather understanding how we are embedded, we are immersed in these living histories. And we have to think much more in a multi-species way and much more collaboratively than we are used to. So we thank you for your attention. Thank you for having us, and we wish you a productive conference and a good panel, a good discussion. Thank you so much. Thanks, May.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Thank you, audience.